Hi, my name is Pedro,
My name is Johan.
I'm Carla.
And my name's Alex.
and today we're going to be presenting to you on what is the use of force. So, what is use of force according to the Los Angeles Police Department? According to the Los Angeles Police Department, use of force allows officers to control an incident by using time, distance, communication, and available resources in order to de escalate a situation. The department is able to use deadly force if necessary in order to de escalate a situation. With that being said, correctional agents have policies and formal procedures with regard to the use of force and its limitations. In general, these policies allow officers to use a certain level of force deemed necessary in order to apprehend somebody. Officers that violate the use of force and use a use of force that is excessive and was not deemed necessary will face lawsuits.
In correctional facilities, there are a lot of rules about how to use of force. Still, correction officers have to deal with a number of problems at work that test their resolve and ability to make fair decisions. When officers use more force than is needed to calm a situation or protect themselves and others, they are using too much force. This problem can come up in many different situations, like taking care of prisoners or running military operations. Instead of using too much force, it may be best to use something less dangerous, like pepper spray, for example. So, even though rules and procedures about the use of force are important, many correctional facilities fail to supervise and deal with the problem of too much force being used in their correctional facilities. Everyone knows that prison is hard, and guards can use physical force on inmates to keep things in order. As part of this force, a prisoner may be pushed against a wall or sprayed with chemicals. Overall, the use of force in correctional facilities is, as quoted, inevitable and will continue happening to keep things running smoothly.
The use of force on patrol can be necessary in certain situations, just like Pedro explained. On March 24th, Officer Jack, Jessica, and Richard took down a gunman despite being told not to. They decided to approach the gunman and tackle him to the ground because there were kids in the area since school had just ended. There is no doubt that the man was a danger to everyone, and that's why they decided to take him down. In certain situations, just like this one, it is crucial to use the use of force because anybody could be in harm's way. It could be the officer, it could be the gunman himself. He could have ended up committing suicide. He could have killed the child. So that's why when an officer is told to use the use of force, it should be in situations like these, not where the gunman thinks that the other person could be a danger to somebody.
The next slide is on lethal use of force. Lethal use of force is most likely to cause deaths and critical injuries. It is also known as deadly force. Deadly force can be used when officers reasonably believe that force is necessary. For example, they use deadly force to defend against threat of death or serious bodily injuries. Some examples that would consider deadly force are use of firearms, carotid neck holds, strike with hard objects on the head, neck, and throat. One example of lethal use of force would be George Floyd's case. You can see that the officers are using deadly force since they are neck holding him. In the next few slides, you will be able to see the dialogue of the interview of one of our group members and Sergeant Reyes from the LAPD Southeast Division. You will see examples where the sergeant was in need of using force.
When asked the sergeant what are the limits of the use of force, he responded by explaining that
the department has strict policies when it comes to use of force. Non-deadly use of force has 5 circumstances where force can be used: to defend themselves, defend others, prevent escapes, overcoming resistance, and effect on arrest or detention. Some examples of non-deadly use of force are using a taser or beanbags. For the deadly use of force is when officers reasonably believe force is necessary for the following reasons: to defend against imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury, or to apprehend a fleeing person for any felony that threaten in death or serious bodily injury.
when the sergeant was asked, does job stress contribute to police brutality, he explained that
It can, because every officer is a human being as well. They are going to perform on how they are feeling throughout the day.
when the sergeant was asked, what do you believe are the causes of police brutality, he explains that
Lack of training, since there is not enough training due to budget cuts. Lack of understanding, since some officers still do not understand the use of force policy. Size of department matters a lot too. If the department is smaller, then they have less resources and less exposure to incidents. And age of the personnel matters too, since younger officers lack of maturity.
And then, when the sergeant was asked another question, can police self-defense be mistaken for brutality? He explains that
Often, police officers are defending themselves but also understand their limitations. The public sees it as excessive force when in reality, we are also aware of the limitations. When using use of force is never pretty.
when the sergeant was asked, have you ever been in this kind of situation before? And if so, can you describe what was going on through your mind? He explains that
He was involved in at least 50 cases of use of force, 4 of those cases being deadly. He gave all of them into custody and it was his last resort. In those 4 cases, which were deadly, the department found his force in policy, meaning that he did not get disciplined since he had to secure the suspect and bring them to an end. He used body weight and waited for backup to arrive. Some of those cases dealt with minor use of force and resulted in arrest or conviction. Others were questioned and released. 2 of those cases were foot pursuits where a gun was pointed at their officers, so he had to fire in both cases. Till this day, one of them is still in prison and the other one is out.
the officer explains to us a case dating back to 2005 in which
Susie Pena was a 19-month-old baby who got shot and died because of the actions of her father, who was drunk, methed, and coked out. Raul Pena had raped his 15-year-old daughter and told her to say her boyfriend had left her when in reality the baby's father was her own dad who raped her. When the mother had found out her husband raped her daughter, she lost it and instantly called the police because the husband was pointing a gun at Susie, which was the 19-month-old baby. Once we arrived, Raul started shooting at us and one of the officers fired and it hit Susie, instantly killing her. Both Raul and Susie passed away that day.
We spent this whole presentation speaking about use of force. There are certain situations where use of force is absolutely necessary and when it's not necessary. What an officer needs to keep in mind is the Graham factors. The severity of the crime, if the suspect poses an immediate threat to an officer, others around him, or even himself or herself, or if the suspect is actively resisting arrest or fleeing the scene. Here we have a couple of cases, one where the officers needed to absolutely use force because the gunman posed a threat to not only himself, but the officers and the people around him, including children. In the second case, we have George Floyd, where he was killed by the officer named Thomas. When he was not resisting arrest, he was on the ground and they just pinned him, putting their knee on his neck. And then we also have the case of the little girl who was killed because of the actions of her father. Now, what are some things that we can do or they can do to help reduce this? Is by educating officers, which is maybe the least effective. Then we also have maybe adding more requirements to who can become an officer. It's becoming more and more effective now, but maybe the use of body cameras, also implementing harsher repercussions, which we see with the case of George Floyd, where the officer actually was sentenced to prison for 3 years.
I hope after seeing this video presentation, you have a better understanding of what use of force is. Like I said, my name has been Pedro.
My name is Johan.
I'm Carla.
And my name is Alex.
Thank you for listening.